Oh my God. Have I been muted the whole time? Okay, y'all. This is the ultimate stream fail. I'm so sorry. Can you all hear me now? I think it was a hardware failure here. Oh, thank you, Brian. And thank you all for sticking around. Okay. Let's start over. So cool. Okay. All right. So I'm going to simplify this because I talked too much the other time. So basically, I was inspired by this blog post by Ray that he connected to Ray Kim, and he connected to his 11 site to MySQL originally. And so when we released at StepSend, we released a Netlify build plugin. And I had this idea that I would take that Netlify build plugin. What that Netlify build plugin does is it builds your schema before basically it builds out and deploys your StepSend schema before your site gets built, so that basically you could then connect to that schema either during your build process, or you could connect that schema from your site via JavaScript. Okay. So that was the idea. And I was like, well, I could probably just recreate that so that I then, because, okay, it's easy to connect maybe to a MySQL database in 11, but like, let's say you had multiple APIs and databases that you want to connect to. You're not just connecting to a single MySQL database. Or let's say you're using something like Hugo, which I love, or some other tools that don't have a built-in way to very easily call out to an API. And pull in data. And I'm a big fan of Hugo, so that's like, it's always been a bit of a struggle. I want to use Hugo, but I can't pull in data very easily, right? So I then went ahead and I built this this script here that I'll show you in a second. I'll go over it again, even though you saw me kind of browsing through it. So essentially, I use the Netlify build plugin. I configure that to build out a schema that's based on my MySQL database, and then I use that schema that's deployed via the Netlify build plugin prior to my build running. That then I connect to that, pull data down from that MySQL database, write that data down into Markdown. Then the site build kicks off, and everything gets deployed as like a finished site. And so that was this article I wrote for Netlify's blog. And I was showing you earlier the script that runs this and discussing why it was a workable solution, but it was not a great solution. Yeah, Brian, 7 takes are the best. This was like, y'all, I wish I was watching the comments because I was here talking forever like an idiot. Anyway, it happens. I am not an expert streamer yet. My sons will be disappointed in me. So this is the script here. Basically, this is a query that I'm querying out to my StepSend schema, my GraphQL API that's deployed on StepSend. This is a simple template that's just for writing Markdown files. It doesn't do a lot. As you can see, it's like very, very fixed. Like it only accepts the title, categories, published, so on. And here I'm just making the API call with my StepSend API key, and here's the endpoint. And then I just loop through that, apply that template, and write out Markdown files. So, and then this is all integrated because like as soon as you kick off the build, I added it to the build script, and then when you kick off the build, it basically runs that, pulls the content from MySQL, writes it into the content folder for Hugo as Markdown files, and then the whole thing gets built and deployed and it's done, right? So that worked, but the problems here were that number one, this you'd have to custom write this file every time. You'd have to rewrite the query. If you wanted to run multiple different queries, it didn't work for that. The Markdown template was very, very simplistic. You'd have to customize that each time for your other projects. And it only wrote Markdown files. It didn't handle data files like JSON or YAML and so on and so forth, right? So I kind of took that and I'm like, I could make it better. and I could make it do a lot more. So that's where I came up with this, what I call a steps in content pull, which I've published to NPM, and it takes a configuration file and then allows you to do quite a lot more. And I'll show you what that does. Essentially, you can use it with the Netlify build plugin as well. That's not a requirement. The only real requirement is that you have set up a StepsN API. And for those of you who don't really know StepsN, I'd love for you to check us out. We allow you to connect to, like, say, build a GraphQL API that's connected to Postgres, to MySQL, or to really any REST API. And you can even combine all of those into a single schema. So that's why I thought it would be really powerful to say, like, okay, any of my data sources that I want to connect to, I can channel them through StepsN and then pull all that content down, convert it to files, and deploy it. And so I think this is great. Like, say, if you're doing Hugo or Jekyll or any of those that don't have an easy way to do this, that's good. If you're doing, even 11 and you just prefer to have things in static files, or any of these, I mean, sometimes it's a little bit easier. Say you're working on something that you want to be able to check those files into your GitHub repo and then be able to version them and stuff that way, rather than have it sitting out on different APIs. There's a lot of reasons why you might want to pull static files. So let me give you a rundown of how this works. So let me open my code here. I'm going to actually show you, first of all, I'm going to show you this first. Code. Okay. So first of all, you need a schema to work with. So I'm going to show you kind of what a schema would look like here. This is my schema. Oh, don't want to see that. This is my schema for my MySQL database that was part of that post there. So let's close all this stuff here. Sorry, I should have cleared this out beforehand, but it's called the Pets blog, and basically it's a Hugo site that pulls Pets data that I stole from Ray, and writes it down into these posts here. You can see these are actually not versioned because I ignore them, because this gets written every time it gets built. The StepsN schema is pretty simple. I have this post, which just represents a blog post that's in the MySQL database. And let me increase the size of the code here. So this is just what the post looks like. It has an ID, title, body, published, and categories. And then these are the two queries that I define here: get posts and get post by ID. And then this is just the categories, which is a simple, like, name categories. I mean, it's a very simple schema. Wasn't a lot. I blame that on Ray. His post was simple, so I stole that from him. So you're saying yeah. Anthony, we could use this to build Twitter for your pets. That's exactly, I think it's a great idea. Pets write the best tweets. Absolutely. So that's the basics of this schema that I'm connecting to here. But let's go through what the content pull thing does. I'm going to show you the code of it. It is open source. And of course, I ran a test and I dumped test data in here, which I shouldn't have done. Boop, boop. Get rid of that. Okay. So, all right. So basically, here's the new version of that same file that I showed you before, except this one allows you to configure it. So you still need to provide an API key. You need to provide a host name and a path. So basically, this is how I configure where you're connecting to. So, like, all of your StepsN schemas will be whatever your account name .stepsn.net, and then your endpoint is something you define when you deploy this. And then this part looks very similar to before, except here you'll notice that I'm actually looping through a bunch of queries. So one of the key things here to me was that I wanted you to be able to define as many queries as you need to. So maybe I have one query that needs to get content that's converted to Markdown, but another query that needs to get data that's converted to YAML, and so on. And this could be multiple different queries from multiple different locations that I need to assemble into a single site, right? So this is you can define these in the config, and I'll show you what the config looks like in a minute. But this is looping through those different queries. And then when I get the data, first of all, I'll show you what this stuff does later. The flattened results is basically sometimes, well, I'll show you how that works later, but basically when you do queries with GraphQL, sometimes they don't all come in like the root of node. So like you might have in a root node, then an array of items that has a node underneath. And this allows me to flatten that based on your configuration. Zooming in more. Sure. Thanks, Kevin. So that allows me to flatten it based on your configuration so that I can then easily convert it to data or to markdown files, right? So we're not kind of traversing through this deep set of nodes. I'll show you how that works in a bit. And then here, this is just like, okay, if it's JSON data, since GraphQL just returns JSON, I just write it out to a file. Done deal. The only thing I do basically is I will, obviously I flatten it if you need to flatten it, if you specify that in the configuration. Similar thing for YAML. It's not that different than JSON other than I just convert the data to YAML here. And that's the only real difference. And I think kind of the magic here is for Markdown. So I have two different sets of logic here for Markdown. One is, did you send me an array of data? And if you did, then you probably you actually want to loop through and create multiple Markdown files, not a single Markdown file. So this way you could send me like a query that has all of your blog posts pulled from somewhere and then it'll just automatically loop through and convert each of these to Markdown. The nice thing is, as before, it was hard coded what the data is. Here, I actually allow you to kind of create that based on the data you send. I'll create the front matter. I even allow some kind of configuration to allow you to specify what additional front matter you may need and stuff like that. So you'll see here, that's how I'm converting everything that isn't the body. I'm converting to front matter. And then here's me adding your additional front matter that you may want. And that's for instance, like if you have Hugo or Jekyll, or you have layout post and you need every one of these to have layout post on it, you can specify that and I'll add it for you. That way you don't have to go back and manually add that. And then in this case, if you aren't sending me an array, I just write it out to a single Markdown file. The other thing here is you'll notice that I allow you to tell me which field is the body, obviously, and which field you want me to generate a slug from. So I will actually generate a slug for each of these based on the field that you specify. So like if you say title, it'll convert that title to a slug and then write it out with that slugified file name. And you can use .mdr or .markdown. It doesn't really matter. In this case, for the single file, you can also use a slug, or you can just tell me what the file name you want it to be is. And I'll show you how that configuration works. So like I said, this is not like super duper magic. The actual logic of it is pretty simple. So I'm going to show you how you configure it. I'm going to go through a couple of configurations and then we'll run it. So in this case, this is my little pets blog, and I've got a bird flying in on my head. I can get the bird. First I'm muted, then I got birds. I don't know if you all saw him flying over my head, but anyway, this is my life. So the configuration, I decided for to kind of put this for reasons, long story, I don't need to get into, to put this all in a JavaScript file. And then what you do is you specify like, okay, here is the core properties that apply to all of the queries. So my account name, which is my steps and account name, and then this is the endpoint that I'm going to hit. So at this point, it supports only hitting one endpoint on steps, and it would assume, because it assumes that you've already consolidated everything into a single endpoint via steps and all of your data sources. And then I just write the query that I want to write. So like in this case, I would say, I would launch it via steps and start. and test out my query, then copy the query into here, and that's how it would work. In this case, I'm converting it to Markdown. The slug field is the title. The body field is body. We're complicated there. This is the folder that I want to have the files placed in, and this is additional front matter I want to add it. So in this case, as you might have imagined, this actually gets all the posts and converts them all to Markdown files. So it's going to be a whole array of posts. Now this second one here is basically I'm getting a single post, and this was just for me to be able to test all these different things. I'm getting a single post, so I'm going to post by the ID of 44, and then I am going to it's very, very similar kind of details. So this would imagine this was I'm calling out to a different table that might have page data rather than post data. So there's only a single page, and I wanted to write out that page. And then finally, this one is so other than that, the details are very, very similar. Again, I don't have to specify a slug field. If I didn't specify a slug field, I'd have to do file name here and then get rid of this. So I have to give it a file name, but since I'm not, it's going to use the slug to do that. Okay, and then this final one is another query that just says convert this data to YAML. And then what folder. So the data ones are very, very simple. It's just a straight conversion. I do want to show you, just so you can understand, for those of you who aren't familiar with Stepson, I'm going to go ahead and show you what this is querying. Okay, npm install -2. You get to see me. npm install. I'm sure nobody streamed that before. This is where I should have brought in the bird while I'm npm installing. Just entertain you with the bird flying around here. Okay. Let's try this again. Okay. Deploying. Okay. Oops. I bring this over here. It launched this, but it launched it in the wrong window. So let's put this here. All right. So let's see if I can. Oh, wrong. Focus on the wrong right window. Fine. Okay. All right. So you can see a little bit better here. This is my schema for that pets blog. You can see I have the get posts, which I can then just kind of do. And this is what it's going to do. And I have an invalid DSN because I haven't launched this in a while, and that's brilliant. So anyway, this is essentially my my schema. It does work. I don't know why it's not working here, but anyway, of course. All right. So that's the schema I'm running from. And you can see here, if you go to npm, I have all of that, the configuration stuff I told you about. I tried to be really detailed about how you configure it. So now let's have some fun and let's actually run it, since my schema is not working. And so yes, I have a project named Foo for testing this, because that's the best project name. Everybody knows what it means. So I'm going to go ahead and run this and say, in this case, show you one more thing. In this case, this file is named config.js. If there's a config.js, you don't have to specify the config when you run it. It just runs itself. So all I got to do is run npx at remotesynth/stepson content poll. And we're going to run this, and hopefully I don't get any DSN errors. Yes, I do. What happened to my API? This worked literally minutes ago, and I must have deployed something incorrect when I just relaunched that. So brilliant, Brian, brilliant. Okay, so this one's not going to work. Let's just go ahead and, oh, I think I know why. Never mind. My bad. Yes, I'm going to fix this. You can't see this because I have to fix my API keys, and I don't want you saving my API keys and calling me API. Let's try this again. I fixed the API keys, please. No. Okay, I did break it when I launched that in. Lovely. All right. Well, what it should have done was placed, which it did do only moments ago. So I had to run my steps and start and totally blow the whole thing. What did I do here? What did I do? My DSN information is wrong. Now you get to see me try and get this to work because I really, really, really would like to try and get this to work. Perfect demo. Thanks, Anthony. All right. This clearly this dated DSN information is incorrect. Why is it incorrect? Let's see. I'm gonna try this again. Part of this is that I deploy these things to Heroku, and Heroku has, while they do give you free MySQL databases, Heroku is also, I run out of requests or whatever connections, and that causes lots of issues. Invalid DSN matching the slash, separating the database name, which is what I'm seeing here. Something changed in, okay, invalid DSN, missing the slash, separating the database name. All right, let's see if we can figure this out real quick. I don't want you to see me debugging forever, but let's see. Missing the slash, separating the database name. There's the slash, separating the database name. It's all there. Okay. All right. Well, all right. Yeah, Heroku. I don't think this is Heroku's fault. I don't actually know whose fault it is. Anyway, let's try a different one. It's not as good a demo because this one did all of the debugging is part of the beauty of the stream. Yeah, and unfortunately, I don't think I'm going to be able to get to the bottom of this one because that's weird. The DSN is there. This worked only moments ago. I think I redeployed it and something changed. Maybe I'm going to have to check with the team, see if I can figure that one out. Anyway, this one's not as good, and I'm not going to try and redeploy it's not as good an example, but it will show you how this works. And the reason it's not as good an example is because in this one, I'm connecting to the dev API. And the dev API does give me my blog post information. But it usually, the way the dev API works is it doesn't give me the body of the post when I do a get all my articles. It only gives me the title and other data. So this will run, but it is going to be missing the body of the post. Unfortunately, you have, in order to get the body of the post, you actually have to get an individual, go one by one. So this isn't an ideal solution for pulling stuff from the dev API, just because of, not because of the tool, but because of kind of limitations of the dev API. No criticism there. I love the dev API. It's great. So we're going to try, instead of that, we're going to actually specify here, since this is not, oh, okay. Click the wrong button. All right. You all saw my email too. Brilliant. All right. So we're, instead of just doing that, because I can actually specify a flag for the config. So we're going to do, and that did not copy. God. It's Friday afternoon, y'all. I should be doing this with a beer or something. All right. So you see, in this case, I'm specifying the flag saying use the config dev. This one, it's going to work. I swear to you, it's going to work. It did work. Okay. So I told it to put it, in this case, I told it to put it in posts. Thanks, Brian. I told it to put it in posts. It's using this query, and it looped through. I have a lot of posts on dev, so you can see it did all of them. You can see it slugified the title. All of the metadata is there. Again, the body isn't there because this API doesn't actually return this the body the markdown body with when you query all the posts. Super frustrating, but it does work. So you can see it did dump all of them here. I wish I could show you how to do it as data files, and maybe I will in a moment. But let's go one more example first before I do this example. So this is using an API that was built by my teammates. And they built an API that actually pulls a combination of data from Agility CMS and from Shopify, and it kind of combines that data. And so what I'm going to do is, in this case, I'm going to pull that data. I'm only going to pull 10 products in this case because it can get pretty long. But I'm getting some of the product data. So if you remember, I said there's some certain cases where the data that comes back from a GraphQL query isn't always in the root. So like in these cases, if you notice, like the title, the slug, and all the metadata I want is basically in the root of this username. I mean, when it puts it, you notice it does put it under author name, which is fine. I mean, I can write my code easily to do that, to handle that kind of situation. It's easy, but in this case, I don't actually want to be able to have metadata that's like edges, node, so on and so forth, right? So what I did was I allowed you to specify what the root node is. So in this case, I wanted you to be able to say like, okay, look through the edges array, pull only the stuff under the node, under the edges array. And this kind of format you'll see is coming, like this is coming from Agility, but WordPress does something similar, and lots of other things have these edges node kind of structure. So I wanted to be able to convert that into a flat set of files that would write the way you expect them to. So I allow you to specify this root node property that then tells me where to look inside the query for the data that you want written out. Again, here I'm writing Markdown files. I'm going to use the title as the slug field and the body HTML, because this is not returning to me Markdown, but I mean, Markdown can handle HTML, so it's cool, no problem. I'm going to put it in content products, and I add this additional front matter to it. So hopefully, let's see if this one works. Let's just change that from dev to agility. All right. All right, so now you can see content, and this is a little bit better example because you do get the full thing. So now I've got the description, I've got the title, I've got published that date. This is the additional front matter I specified. Here's the body written out here. So I did get one for every single product that of 10 products I asked for, right? So all of that works. So let's see. Hopefully that makes sense to y'all. So then actually the idea would be here, you can then take this and instead of like just say, running this every time you want to run a build, you actually integrate this, like as in my prior example, you integrate it into the whole build process, so that then you can just say like, run this before my build, even on Netlify, pull content from whatever data sources I've hooked up, write it into the files I need to run my site, build the site, and deploy it. So you could easily just call this npx steps on content pull in your build product, like change your npm run build script, or just change your build script. Hey Nick, when you change your settings, how your build settings in like Netlify or whatever, and it would run this beforehand and pull all of these files. So hopefully that looks cool to you all, and hopefully you will check it out. It is open source, so you can contribute. There's a number of things like, so there's a number of things I think that can be improved on it. I think that, number one, right now, the configuration, like if you mess up the configuration, we have a little bit of error messages and stuff that are added here, but it doesn't actually check every single variation. If you mess up the config, you're likely to run into errors. So that's something I'd love to fix. I think there might be other scenarios that I'm not considering for different. I really kind of designed this around the idea that you'd be using it, like say on tools like Hugo or Jekyll or Leaventy. But maybe if you're using other tools, there are other ways you'd like that data converted, and those would be things that I'd love to see people contribute to. So let me see, since you all are here, hopefully you'd be cool with me seeing if I can get the data file stuff going. So let's see. First of all, let's go ahead and go back into, I'm going to go back into my pets blog stuff because I really don't understand what the heck is going on here, right? Let's see. Have this open. Now you know my DSN, but that's cool because there's literally nothing here. So you can have your fun on my DSN. So let's see if we can't figure out what the heck is going on. So that's my MySQL DSN. Where am I properly doing this in the config? So here's my config YAML, and I know what's going on. I know what's going on. I am actually going to do something. All right. This is me using a cloak. It's a good idea. Thanks, Nick. I definitely need to get that. In this case, I'm cool. I'm just this DSN is gonna, first of all, it's short-lived. I will kill it. Yeah, but I need that too. This is what I did wrong. I bet you. This is what I did wrong. Ready? I was using features that aren't yet released on the command line. I was using beta features, but I was not using a beta version of the CLI. Ready? Let's see. All right. So I will, why did it open in an incognito window? I don't know. All right, here we go. Here we go, folks. Ready? Title, publish, ID, body. Yes. All right. It wasn't that hard. This is what I get. This is what I get for putting. Okay, so for those of you who don't understand what just happened, we are releasing in the CLI the ability to use environment variables inside your configuration, but that's only in the beta channel. It's not in the live channel for the CLI, and that's what I did wrong. So now not only do I have do it now, I got this working, and now we can use it. Let me go ahead. This should work now. All right, let's try this again. Ready? We're going to go back to this one. I do need to go here and change. I am not giving away my API keys. I did give away my DSN, and I will have to fix that. But we're going to get this to work. Ready? So now we're going to try it again. Let's go ahead and run this. This is without any of the specifying config. So this one, if you recall, here's my foo. Oh, there it is. Foo. This one was actually pulling and putting stuff in. Actually, I should do this first. Well, no, go ahead. Okay, so this was this config that was pulling posts, and it was pulling a single post here, and it was pulling a data file that I was converting to YAML. So these posts were going to go in content/blog, and you'll see here's my posts, here's my markdown, here's all the metadata. So this works at kind of exactly as you might expect. It's just dummy data for those of you who are curious. And it's Ray's dummy data. So he wrote this. It's very entertaining reading, doggo ipsum. Lucia, you don't want my DSN. You basically, get your 10 connections out of my DSN anyway. So here I was writing the single file. So if you remember, this was the one I got via ID 44, and it wrote it here where I specified in the root. So the key thing there is, like, if you don't want to actually put it in the subfolder, just leave the folder blank, and it'll put it in the root. Yeah, everybody gets a DSN. Yeah, you can all use my MySQL database that has nothing on it. That's very limited freebie account. Anyway, but I will go ahead and change the password when we get off here. So don't worry. All right, so the last thing here was that the data file, so I converted, this is just categories. There was only 2 categories, but I just converted it to YAML. So I did write out this YAML data file, which you could use in pretty much any static site generator, and all of that. So like in this case, again, we're using multiple queries to get different pieces of data. In this case, it's all coming from a single MySQL database, but imagine you weren't getting all this data from the same place. Maybe my categories are sitting in like a Google Drive, spreadsheet, or in Airtable or something like that. Whereas my posts are in a CMS, and maybe I want some data coming from MySQL. I could have done multiple queries here, or even single queries, and combine all that data using StepSend, and then pulling it all, writing it out to files. So I think the key thing here is like what StepSend's allowing me to do is easily connect all those sources via one single source. And then what this tool allows you to do is then take all of those sources and just pull them into files, and write out file content. So yeah, so here, if you want to learn more, like I wrote up a little post about it. This is actually not on our blog. Why is that? Untitled Jamstack, right, steps in. God, I'm a mess today, y'all. It's the best time to stream when you're a total mess, disorganized. That's what you. So it's converting API files, to data files, and I walked through a little bit how this works. A lot of this is the stuff I just showed you here, but I also show you like if you want to go ahead and like say integrate this in your Jekyll build, you just kind of change your build command to that. Same thing with Hugo, you do something similar. Again, you can also go to like this npm.js. I'll put the link in the chat here. So for those of you who are watching the chat. Thanks, Nick. Thanks for being understanding that my streaming skills need upgrading. So again, you can go here and check it out. I tried to go into great detail about each of the configuration pieces. And thanks, Kevin. Thanks for being understanding. Skills with a Z. That's the only real skills there are. Skills with an S is just lame. So yeah, it tells you basically these are the different pieces that you can define in the root. This is the different query configuration. So again, you have like the query, which is the GraphQL stuff, what you're converting into, the folder, and that root node if necessary. And then what each of the pieces you can convert it to, and when you're converting it to Markdown, the different pieces that you can add to that to basically define how it writes the Markdown files, and then how you run it, and then the different flags are available there. You can even specify your API key if you want to which would be your StepSend API key. You can specify it here. It's mostly there for testing, but that's just another option available to you. I'm happy to run through more of the code, or if any of y'all have any questions, if you want to dig, would it be useful for me to go more into how it works from the code standpoint? It's not that fancy, but anybody, you tell me. I'm here to answer your questions. I really, really appreciate you all joining and being patient through all of my issues. Thankfully, this is also going to YouTube, where we'll be permanently in memory all of my screw ups today, and you all can be like, reference back to that when you remember that time, Brian, that you started on mute, showed everybody your DSN, broke the you tried to use unreleased features and broke your API. What else can we go through? How many things I go? Yeah. So, yeah. So, and the bird, yes, and the bird, yes. And thanks, Nick. It's good to know somebody who actually does a lot more streaming than me. Still, make me feel better. So, thank you all for being so kind. All right. So Lucia said one of the interesting things one of the challenges that I had here when I built this, so as I said, I wanted you to be able to specify basically a root, and that came up because of that that one with the nodes, edges, nodes thing, right? And so I wanted you to be able to tell me, like, okay, here's where you need to start to get the data. And I thought, oh, I'm like, oh, that's easy. I'll just add that to get the data. Where here where I get data, I'll just add it here. I'll go data, and then I'll say data dot. Like I thought, oh, I can do like data dot whatever, like your config thing that you specified, and that'll work. Except that, of course, that doesn't work because number one, you'd specify something dot, multiple dots, maybe multiple levels down. You're not specifying only one level down, so you can't just do that this way. And then the second thing was because, as we noted in the in that example here, where was it? My foo example here. As we noted in the agility one, the data comes back in an edges of, like, this is multiple items, not a single item. So I needed you to be able to specify edges, that edges is an array. Okay, so then let's, what am I doing here? Crap. Let's close this. Don't save. I don't know what I changed here, and I don't want to make a mess. Okay, so I'm going to go back here. So that's where this flatten results thing comes in. Basically, what I had to do was I call that. Here's flatten results. I'm sending it the data, and then I'm sending it an array of nodes so I can loop through those and go through and flatten them. So in that case, whatever you specified in that query, I just split it based on the dot, assuming that each level obviously is a something dot something else, right? And so what this does here is then it says, okay, I'm going to duplicate the array, right? Deep copy that full array or whatever you call it. And then on every one, I'm going to loop through, and for each node, if it includes this array notation, I'm going to actually, just this removes it. And then I need to call this again. I basically get that node, but I know it's an array, so I then need to loop through it. So this is kind of a recursive function. Well, not kind of. It is a recursive function that then calls flatten results on the array within that object that you sent. So essentially that allows me to loop through that edges, right? And then flatten the results within edges, because in this case, we want to get rid of the dot node part, right? So that allows you to specify like edges array dot node, and then I flatten the whole thing out into a flat structure where I then remove basically that whole edges array, and I remove the node from within that. So it flattens the whole thing out so that all you get when you query is essentially if it was just like this, right? So I basically wipe out this whole piece of it, and so that you're just getting like that, which is what I need, so that then I can write that to Markdown or to Yaml or whatever without that all that extraneous levels of data here, right? So that's what that does. So in base case, when the last node is the base case when the last node is removed. I'm not sure what you mean, Lucia. Like, so, I mean, it basically, yeah, it just stops looping once it gets to the end. If you notice, when I did that earlier, when I showed the beginning code, I'm actually passing it as an array, right? Like, so when I flatten it, I'm passing this as an array. So each of those levels is just like an array, and then I'm going to loop through and then flatten each piece that way. Like, when does it notice this? Yeah, because it's looping through this array, which is equivalent to that array is basically, in this case, so be like if it turns this into an array splitting here. So this array is only 2 items. So it loops through those 2 items. And then what it does is, go back here. So as it's looping through those two items, if it finds one that represents an array, it then assumes it's an array and maps through that and writes that to this array data. So basically, all that's doing is writing. That's removing the edges. So now we've gotten rid of, in this case, the edges array, and then we need to now get rid of the node. So then I'm flattening the results again, passing it the next node, right, and then removing the dot node piece. Yes, and explaining recursive stuff is really, really hard. It's actually, I've been programming for a long time, and it's really hard to write sometimes too. So that's how it knows. It just keeps, in this case, if it finds an array, it's going to loop through each of those and remove the sub nodes within that. And again, this could happen like if you had an array that had an object and so on and so forth. It'll work for that too. So that's only the really like interesting, I guess, piece to me of this. The rest is pretty basic. I'm just using the standard libraries for like for writing Markdown and stuff. I can show you actually here. So the file utils, I just wrote some. So the write Markdown is pretty simple. It just says like, it's just essentially taking the front matter that you pass, converting that to YAML, and then writing a very simple file. And that's really about it. The only other thing going on here is because you can specify content being dumped into a directory that doesn't exist. So I need to make it, if you specify a destination that doesn't exist yet, I'll write that destination and then write the files into it. But yeah, that's that. I mean, there's nothing here too fancy. Essentially, this creates your front matter, and then this just joins it with the Markdown body that you specified in the body field, and then writes it to, makes a directory if necessary, and then writes it to a file. And that's it. That's the super complicated write Markdown stuff. Very easy. If you want to, feel free to steal from it if that's useful to you. Oh yeah, thanks for sharing the link to the repository, Lucio. Happy to answer any other questions before we go. Otherwise, I think after my many fails, I deserve a drink. Oh yeah, that was that really helped me. So funny enough, thanks for sharing that as well, Lucia. You are better at my own comments than I am at my comments. So, or my chat or whatever. So thank you. Yeah. So funny enough, I had never actually written an NPM package before, at least nothing that was like for public consumption. So that article was really helpful for me in writing this. Yeah. So this is not intended to be something you npm install. This is actually purely intended to be like npx run it, or you could technically globally install it, I guess, and you could run it that way. But I don't really see the need of why you'd want to do that. So because you could just npx and run it and it works. And by the way, I have tested that you can. Like on Netlify, add that to your build, and Netlify does not have a problem. So I was a little worried. I hadn't never tried to run an npx command in the build process on Netlify, but actually, because I don't know if you all recall, when you run npx, the first time it's going to say, "Oh, do you want to install this?" And you say yes. So I wasn't sure if they had somehow set it up so that it bypasses that confirmation, but yeah, it works. So you can call an npx, command line from your build process on Netlify, and it works just fine. Okay, so that's it for me today. Unless anybody has any other questions. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Lucia. Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Brian, with the wrong spelling of your name. Thank you, Practical Dev. I don't know if that's also you, Nick, but glad to have you all join. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Kevin. for joining and for talking to me and for forgiving all of my screw ups. And I will see you all soon.